This lesson is the follow-up to the previous lesson I produced on completing the square for quadratics, which have the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where the coefficient a is equal to 1. Okay, so for example, x squared plus 9x minus 15. And those quadratics factorize into the form where you have x plus p all squared plus q, where p and q are numbers to be determined. In today's lesson, we're going to go through completing the square for quadratics where the value of a, so this one, is greater than 1, which makes it slightly more difficult. And when you factorize these style of quadratics, they end up in the form, which I've just underlined there, with an extra number to determine, so a, b, and c, right? So by the way, the value a there does not correspond to that value of a there. It's just a number to be determined. So for example, let's just use different symbols not to complicate things. So maybe we have px squared plus qx plus r are the quadratics we're dealing with today. So an example of that would be something like maybe 5x squared plus 10x minus 5. It's where this first coefficient, the one before the x squared, is greater than 1. We're going to carry out this technique on these two. But first of all, I think it would be a good idea to write down a rule to follow so you can do this yourself. So I'm going to try this one. And then what I want you to do is to try this one yourself and then check your answer against the mark scheme I've attached below the video. So let's take a look at the rules first of all. Number 1, you have to factorize numbers only for the x squared plus x part. So what do I mean by that? This bit only. So if I just drag that to there, so that's the bit I'm referring to. And you want x squared basically on its own. What I mean by that is the coefficient before it must equal 1. Then, once you've done that, the next thing to do is complete the square on factorized part only. So once you've got this new form, this partially factorized part, then you complete the square in the normal way that I explained in the previous video, which is, if I just put this in a different color, just to remind you, is half the middle number and then put into brackets where you have x plus that number, whatever it may be, all squared. So let's take a look at this in action. I think the rules will become more clear once I start performing the technique. So let's rewrite it here. So you've got 8x squared plus 16x minus 16, and it must finish in the form a bracket x plus b close bracket all squared plus c. So factorize the numbers only for the x squared plus x part. So I want to get x squared on its own. So we can see we have 8 and we have 16. 8 will be the highest common factor going into both of those terms. Remember, we are not factorizing the x's, just the numbers. So that gives us, then the next thing is to complete the square on the factorized part. So what is the factorized part? It's this bit. So I just put a bracket there. So that's the bit we complete the square on. And as explained in the previous video, what you have to do is you halve the middle number, and then that's the part that goes into the bracket. X plus 1 all squared with the 8 still there. And at this point, we can ignore the 16 for the moment. So we've completed the square just on this bracketed part. Half the middle number, put it into brackets, and all squared. What I'm going to do is expand this bit. So that'll be x plus 1, x plus 1 with the 8 outside. And that gives us 8. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is 1x. 1 times x is another x, so that's 2x. And then 1 times 1 is 1. Right, now comes the final bit. So I expand this out, so I get 8x squared plus 8 times 2 is 16x plus 8 times 1 is 8. And then, if I go back to my original expression, which I'm going to now add this title here. So this is the original. And what we do a check to see what is the same and what is different. And whatever is different, that's the bit we have to change so that it's completely identical. we can see 8x squared there is the same as the 8x squared there. We can see the 16x is the same as the 16x. However, the positive 8, let's do that in red actually, the positive 8 is not the same as the minus 16. So we have to make it the same as minus 16. And this number that we're going to introduce to make it the same as the minus 16 is this bit here. Okay, that's the C number. What number do I need to put in to go from positive 8 to minus 16? Well, the answer is I have to take away 24. Now that I've worked out what number I need to add in at the end, I can present my final answer. So the final answer will be, remember this bit, this thing that I've just made has come from this part. So I'm going to rewrite that. So it'll be 8x plus 1 all squared minus 24. From the original expression, factorise into the form a bracket x plus 1 b plus some value c. We can see that a is 8, b is 1, and c is negative 24. A little bit more tricky than the first quadratics that I did in the previous video because you got this extra step. However, it is completely methodical. If you follow the steps, you will get the correct answer. So that's exactly what I want you to do next. Have a try of this one. And I've attached the answer below in the mark scheme. Now don't worry that that's not a nice even number. You can still go about and factorise in the same way using fractions. It'll be slightly harder, but the procedure is exactly the same.